not operator, and shorthands in regex. In this code challenge, you will need to implement the function countAllWords that expect one parameter text. This function should count all words from the input text. We count numbers as words. The type of the input text is a string, and the function itself should return a number. And these are example inputs and the expected results. In the first input, we have two words, red dragon and attacks. So the first word is separated by underscore. In the second input, we have three words, so don't be jealous. And the word don't is separated by backtick. In the third input, we have four words, so we count numbers as separate words. And the fourth input is an edge case, which is an empty string. In this case, our program should return 0. At first, I need to write a regex pattern. And for that, I go to the website regex101.com. Here I put all example inputs into the text string, so in the match information tab, we will be able to see our matches. So at first, try solving this challenge your own. And now let's solve it together. We want to count how many words we have. So at first, let's determine what can be inside of one word. Words can contain all English letters. So for that, let's create a character class. And inside of this class, let's put all English letters. But instead of writing A, B, C, and so on, we have a range. The same as for numbers. So we have a range from A to Z. And if you hover over this, you will see that this is a range. Right now, we have only one match, and this is because we don't have any flags. So let's activate our flags by clicking this slash. And here, let's choose two flags. So at first, the global flag. Now our function will look for all the matches that satisfies our pattern. And then let's also put case insensitive flag so that our pattern would treat uppercase letters and lowercase letters in the same way. Now we see many matches in our console, but the first problem is that the character class by default selects only a single character. So the length of our matches will be equal to 1. So let's explicitly write it. So we can control the length of our match by putting curly braces. Now I wrote 1 and it works absolutely in the same way because this is the default. Then I will add comma. And now if we hover over this quantifier, we will see that this quantifier has the length from 1 to unlimited. And now we can see that our pattern almost works. So for the first line, it can find 3 matches, red, dragon, and attacks. Now it counts the red dragon as one word, and this is because we don't count the underscore. So let's add this underscore to the character class. So now from the first input, we can find 2 words, so this is the right answer. Then from the second input, we also see that something doesn't work, and this is because we don't take into account the backtick of the word don't. So let's add it to our pattern. Now the second line also works, so we successfully can find 3 matches. And then on the last line, I see that we don't take into account the numbers. So let's also add a range of numbers. And now I see that our pattern successfully works, so let's copy it and let's solve our challenge. Now on the right side, I see the VS Code, and on the left side, I see a console with 4 times word undefined. So now it means that we are connected to the browser and we can start to solve our challenge. So at first, let's create a variable with the regex pattern. Then we need to use this pattern in one of the regex functions. At this point we know 2 functions, test and match, and I think that match suits perfectly because it returns an array of all matches that satisfy this pattern. So for that, I call the method match that is attached to a string, and the input text that we pass has the type of string. So now let's store the result into a separate variable. And then let's return the result. Now, if you look to the console, you will see that instead of the number, we return an array of words. But each array has a parameter length that we see here in the console. If I will call the parameter length, from the first line, I will get the number 2. From the second line, I will get the number 3. From the third line, I will get the number 4. And the only problem now that we have is with the final line. So currently, if we don't have any matches, the .match function returns a null. And now we need to handle this case because if we try to call the .length method on the null, we will get an error. So at first, let's try to call .length method. then you will see this error in the console, but if I comment out the last input, you will see the right answers for all the remaining inputs. And this is the main reason why I added this edge case. So you should think about the cases that can throw an error inside of your function. And as I said before, all what we need is just to handle the null. Now I check that if the match result is equal to null, in this case I return 0. And then I definitely know that match result variable is an array that contains a property length. So I don't have any errors anymore. Our function works correctly, but now let's talk about shorthands that can help our regex to be more readable. At first, let's start from quantifiers. In regex, we have several common quantifiers, and one of them is that we are using right now. This quantifier with the length from 1 until unlimited is very common, so instead of writing it inside of the curly braces, you can just write plus, and it will work absolutely in the same way. And if you hover over the plus, you will see the same description as we had before, which means that they work in the same way. Now let's look to other common quantifiers. So at first, we will need to learn about zero length in regex. And for that, I have added this simple text string. Let's find the G letter. For that, you can just type a letter G, and the default length of this letter is 1. Let's explicitly show this length. So now it works in the same way, but with regex, instead of the length 1, we can add length 0. And if I put the length 0, you will see a very strange outcome that now in the match information we see a lot of empty strings. And then in the text string you see these columns with purple blocks. And if you think logically about this pattern, we are looking for the letter G and the amount of letters that we want to find is 0. So it means that we are searching for nothing. And regex reacts on this kind of construction in the way that it selects all possible empty strings inside of our text string. I have never seen that it was useful in any patterns, but this is a common problem that you might be faced in the future. So now if you see that your regex returns empty strings, it means that you specified for regex to search for nothing. So zero length itself is not useful, but what if we want to find a range from 0 to 1? In this case, you start to see that we are not looking only for empty strings, but in some cases, we also have matches with just a letter G. And this kind of construction oftenly called optional. So because we are looking for G letters with the length 0, so nothing, or we are looking for the G letter with the length 1. Again, this construction itself is not very useful, but if we add one more letter inside of this pattern, so for example A, in this case, you see that we don't select empty strings anymore. And this is because inside of our pattern we have a required parameter A that our regex must find. And then after it we have an optional parameter G that might be followed after the letter A. If you look to this text string, you will see that on the first line we select just the letter A. And this is because inside of our pattern we require the letter A and then we require a letter G with length 0 or 1. If we don't have the letter G after the letter A, it means that the length of this letter is 0. The first line satisfies this pattern. On the second line, we have both letters A and G. And this line also satisfies our pattern because now we have one letter A and one letter G. So the letter G with length 1. And then you see on the next lines that we only select AG from the string. So we don't select the last letter G. This quantifier is very often in regex. So for that we have a separate shorthand, which is a question mark. If you hover over this question mark, you will see that the length of this mark is from 0 until the 1. And also you might see a slight white border around the letter G, which means that this quantifier is attached only to the letter G. And this is actually a very good symbol for showing optional, because in many programming languages, if we want to specify that some kind of parameter is optional, we put question mark after this parameter. But now let's return back to a full version of the quantifier. And now what if I want to select the range from 0 until the unlimited? In this case, I write 0 and then comma, and if I hover over it, you will see that the length is from 0 until unlimited. And now you can see that we select a letter A, and then we also select a letter G if it follows after the A, but because the final range is unlimited, we can put as many G letters as we want after the letter A. And this is also a very common quantifier that we use. So for that, we have a separate shorthand, which is an asterisk. So if you hover over it, you will see the same description, and you will see that it is also attached only to the G letter. Now let's return back to the challenge that we had, and now let's talk about the shorthands for character classes. So the first shorthand that we have is /v, and if you hover over this shorthand, you will see that this is equivalent to a character class that contains all English letters, numbers, and also underscore. And a letter V is an abbreviation for a word, so this shorthand contains all symbols that are counted as words. But now we see that we have duplication inside of our character class, so let's remove the duplicated part. So at first I remove the range from A to Z, then I also can remove the range from 0 to 9, and then I also can remove underscore. But I can't remove a backtick because backtick is not inside of this shorthand. And now as you see, it works in the same way, but this pattern looks much smaller. So let's also test this pattern inside of our function. Now I paste this pattern, and now you see that we have the same outcome in our console. And in the beginning, it might be much more difficult for you to read this kind of patterns, but if you try to Google a regex pattern, or if you try to generate it with AI, with high probability, you will find these shorthands inside of the patterns. And after some time, when you get used to these shorthands, you will find that they're actually easier to read. I have added 2 new console logs. So the first one contains an email, and the second one contains 2 separate words. But if we look only to an email input, you will see that our program counts 3 words instead of 1 inside of this input. And if you think how to modify this pattern, you will find that there are many symbols that we need to add inside of this character class. But actually at some point, you will find that it is not possible to take into account all possible symbols that can be between the words. But what we can take into account is that all words are divided by space. Or maybe inside of one large input, we also can have tabs or new line symbols. And there is actually another approach how we can solve this challenge, and this is by dividing our words with a space symbol. Now I added these inputs to the website, and then let's try to solve this challenge by separating words only with a space symbol. So at first, let's clean our character class, and then let's add a space. And now you can see that we have only matches of the space symbol. And also because we use quantifier from 1 until unlimited, even if a word contains several spaces, we will match all of them. And now what I actually want to do is I want to select everything except of these symbols. And for that we have a not operator in regex, which looks like a caret symbol. Now you see that we select everything except of the space, but actually there are also other space symbols that we don't want to include. So for example, a new line. For putting a new line inside of the character class, we need to write a \n. So in the same way as we wrote in JavaScript. And now you can see that the email input is treated as one word. And this is because it doesn't contain any spaces. So now we can use this pattern for solving our challenge, but actually we have a shorthand for that. For selecting white space symbols, we have a shorthand \s. And if you look to the character class that it is equal to, you'll find that it contains many different space symbols. Let's write some of them. For example, /r is a courage return symbol, so we might have it as a space separator inside of some inputs. Also, there is /f that might be used inside of the forms. In a similar way, there can be /v that is used for vertical white spaces. And the last one is /t, which is tab. So these are one of the most common space symbols, and instead of writing all of them, we can just use a shorthand /s. So now you see that our pattern works in the same way, but actually, even for this character set, we have a shorthand. Now what we select is the opposite from the space symbols. So we select everything except of the space characters. And for that we have a shorthand which is slash and capital letter S, and if you hover over it, you will see that in the beginning of the character class it contains a caret symbol which is a not operator. And also this shorthand contains square brackets, so we can even remove them. And this is the shortest solution that we can use to count how many words we have inside of the string. So it contains only 3 characters. I understand that all these shorthands can be very overwhelming and you don't even need to memorize them. Actually, if we want to find all of them, let's close the Match Information tab and let's open the Quick Reference tab. And here inside of the section common tokens, you will see all common syntax that is used in regex. And if you scroll a little bit down, you will see /s symbol. So we can click it and then we will see a description that it matches any space, tab or new line. And also you will see a /capital letter S, which matches anything other than a space, tab or new line. In the same way you can find other shorthands, for example /d, which is equal to a range of numbers. And in the same way, a capital letter means that this is the same range but with a not operator before it. So it is equal to anything other rather than a decimal or digit. But now let's copy this pattern and paste into our function. Now I have the shortest regex pattern for this solution. As you see, all these numbers from the console match with the numbers that we have expected. So it means that our function works correctly. Today you have learned about shorthands and not operator in regex. In the next episode, we will learn about escape symbol.